All over the world, old-growth forests are under threat, and nowhere more so than in Tasmania, where logging for wood pulp and chip is threatening a wide variety of habitats and animals, including the magnificent wedge-tailed eagle and Australia's largest carnivorous marsupial, the Tasmanian devil. This is what's happening to them.
This ancient forest may look peaceful enough, but as they graze on the forest greenery, these wallabies are being watched. Every movement recorded in infinite detail by eyes much more powerful than our own. Armed with a powerful set of talons, he is a formidable predator. He is none other than Australia's largest bird of prey, the Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle. For 10,000 years, he and a host of other iconic Australian species have found refuge on an island where the forests remained in all their glory. Where untouched rivers snaked across the landscape, and a vast rugged coastline stretched for thousands of kilometers. The eucalypt forest canopy has long been the wedge-tailed eagle's kingdom, but these Tasmanian forests are now very different from how they once were. These trees are not just ideal for nesting. They also represent thousands of tons of fine quality timber, woodchip, and profitable pulp. Stripping its habitat appears also to be stripping the eagle of its chances of survival. Fewer than 1,500 Tasmanian wedge-tails remain, and they are listed as endangered. It seems that the eagle's reign might be coming to an end. This eagle is soon to become a proud father. Deep in the forest lies the fragile future of his kind. 100 million years ago, the supercontinent Gondwana shattered into pieces. One of these pieces was Australia. On its journey northwards, conditions became increasingly hot and dry, causing much of the once extensive temperate rainforest to wither and die. The cool southeastern corner became the final stronghold. In these prehistoric forests, the wedge-tailed eagle hunted, but he was not the only inhabitant with a taste for meat. The forest floor was patrolled by the Tasmanian devil and by the most fabled marsupial of all. Stalking through those forest glades, not wolf nor tiger, but in fact the top predator of Australia's marsupial empire, the thylacine. These three carnivores ruled side by side for millennia, but it was not to last. Slowly but surely, the forests of mainland Australia had become a shadow of their former selves. Wallabies grazed nervously in the forest understory, but it was no longer the thylacine or devil that they feared. Now there was a new threat, the dingo. Introduced from Asia, this fearsome competitor swiftly sidelined the marsupial giants. The demise of the mighty thylacine and devil looked certain. But fate would have it differently. Around 10,000 years ago, as the Ice Age released its grip, sea levels rose and a corner of the Australian continent became separated from the mainland. This was to become Tasmania, a final refuge for Australia's great predators. Here, thriving in the cooler climate, ancient temperate forests remain. The eucalypt trees that dominate these forests have an unsurpassed ability to thrive in even the harshest of environments, from the snowy alpine peaks to the sandy soils of the coast. It was in these most contrasting of habitats that new animal forms evolved, forms unique to Tasmania. The spiny echidna is found throughout the Australian continent, but in Tasmania, where temperatures can drop below freezing, the echidna has evolved to fend off the bitter cold. The fur between its spines grows thicker and longer, keeping it warm as it forages for ants in the icy ground. The Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle has also become uniquely Tasmanian. It is larger and darker than the mainland eagle and has distinctly different nesting behaviour. This couple's huge nest has been in the family for generations, and it's no wonder they don't want to give it up. Real estate like this is highly sought after. To us, there may seem to be no shortage of trees, but for the Tasmanian wedge-tail, nesting options are few and far between. Unlike their mainland cousins, their nests are confined almost exclusively to the lofty branches of old-growth eucalypt trees and need to be protected from strong winds. It's this specialised nesting requirement which is now partly responsible for the Tasmanian eagle's decline. Nick Mooney, a wildlife biologist, is one of Tasmania's foremost wedge-tailed eagle experts.
Now, wedge-tailed eagles much prefer old-growth native forest for nesting, and this old-growth native forest has to have a certain structure. It has to allow access for the eagles, but it also has to have suitable hunting areas within about 10 kilometres. An eagle can't hunt a long way away and deliver food regularly enough to its young to fledge those young. So the huge areas of old growth often don't sustain eagles. They need a variety of habitats to sustain them.
For generations, this forest habitat stretched uninterrupted into the distance. But Tasmania's isolation provided just temporary reprieve. Arriving on the Australian mainland, Europeans wasted little time in making their way across the water to the island. All too soon, the eagle's habitat came under siege. Land was cleared to make way for grazing, crops, and timber. Blaming them for devastating livestock, Tasmania's new human inhabitants forged a war of extermination against the eagle, devil, and thylacine. The devil and eagle managed to avoid the brunt of the attack, but the thylacine was relentlessly hunted down, and by 1930, the last known individual was shot in the wild. With only a precious few remaining in captivity, the future of the thylacine was inevitable. In 1936, ironically the year that it was finally given official protection, the last known individual died in Hobart Zoo. This time, there was no other refuge for the species. The first of our ancient predators had vanished for good. Today, the wedge-tailed eagle and devil remain the top predators of the Tasmanian forests. But now they too face a similarly grim fate. Jeff Law, campaigns coordinator for the Wilderness Society in Tasmania, is one of those working to protect their habitat.
Well, the wedge-tailed eagle is a magnificent creature, and it is an important part of the forest ecosystem because it is constantly killing and eating and therefore removing the old, sick, dying animals that it preys on. So that fulfills a very, very important function in the ecology and allows all of the other species in the forest and on the plains and in the woodlands to maintain their own genetic biodiversity, health and strength.
As darkness descends on Tasmania's forest, the winged predator settles down for the night. But in the long shadows, the Tasmanian devil has awoken. She doesn't need daylight. Her strong sense of smell is the key to her scavenging success. A dead wallaby will keep her satisfied for several days. Her strong jaws crush through fur, skin and bone with ease. But all is not well for the Tasmanian devil. A facial tumour disease that appeared suddenly in 1996 now threatens the future of the species. Crippling cancers develop around the face and neck of infected devils. Feeding becomes difficult, and starvation eventually takes its toll. A Tasmanian government research team are monitoring the spread of the disease. In a rescue attempt, they propose to transport populations of healthy devils to wildlife parks and offshore islands, where it is hoped they will breed and produce a new, healthy generation.
Now that we're losing the Tasmanian devil because of this horrible facial tumour disease, the wedge-tailed eagle has become absolutely important and paramount important as a top predator. It looks like being potentially the only functioning top predator we're going to have in Tasmania for some decades, even if things go okay with the devil in the long term.
It's the beginning of spring, but blustery winds from the south have brought unseasonable weather. And our nesting eagles are about to experience a very different face of the Australian wilderness: snow. The patient mother, undeterred, keeps her precious bounty safe and warm. Around her, the forest is thrown back into winter. Across Tasmania, snow falls thick and fast, and animals work overtime to find food. This wombat, more used to burrowing in sun-baked soils, digs patiently to reach the grass hidden below. But summer's not far away, and as the snow melts, torrents of icy water cascade through the maze of trees. Our male eagle has returned from the hunt. His partner has been incubating their eggs for 6 weeks, and her patience has paid off. She'll be sharing this meal with her newborn son. Over the coming days, they'll work tirelessly to find food for the hungry chick. At times, they'll have to leave the chick and his unborn brother alone on the nest. For now, he is an only child, but not for long. 3 days later, the family is complete. But another mouth to feed means double the amount of work, and it's soon time for another meal. It's Mum's turn. The wet eucalypt forest around her nest is managed by Forestry Tasmania, the government body responsible for the island's 1.5 million hectares of state forest. Far beneath the canopy, a dense understory grows so thick that even sunlight can barely penetrate through to the floor beneath. In this moist environment, mosses and fungi feed nutrients into the soil, allowing the giant mountain ash that tower above to become some of the tallest trees in the world. Within this forest is a coop, an area to be felled. There are many methods for clearing forest for timber, but in these wet eucalypt forests, the standard practice has been to cut down every single tree. Useful timber is dragged away, leaving behind a devastated landscape. This is clear felling. On average, more than 15,000 hectares of native forest has been clear felled annually for the past 7 years. This is an area greater than 50 soccer fields cleared every single day. Soaring above, the female eagle scans the landscape for a meal. Eagles often fly more than 2,000 meters high, but today she is keeping low, searching for movement. Visual perception is at least 3 times that of a human, and she can adjust focus 10 times as fast. Eagles are not fussy eaters. Mammals, birds, reptiles, or even fish are all on the menu. She flies silently, her wings built for stealth and speed. What the mother brings back might be enough to satisfy 2 growing youngsters, but peace among siblings never lasts long. Driven by instinct, like many other birds of prey, the older chick begins to bully his brother, pecking aggressively at his head. Survival is a fight for the lion's share of what is on offer. Before long, only one chick remains. If the remaining chick doesn't survive, a year's opportunity will be lost. Success is far from certain. Summer has arrived, and the hot, dry air sucks the moisture from fallen branches and leaves. Suddenly, the forest bursts into flames. Natural fires have raged through Tasmania's forests for centuries. The trees will be scarred but not destroyed, and many new shoots will emerge through the ashes. Another fire fills Tasmania's skies with smoke, though this one is human-induced. The destination is the clear-felled coop. Firebombs are dropped from the circling helicopter, and within minutes, the felled forest becomes a blazing furnace. The land falls silent as the grave. As ancient trees are reduced to ash, this might appear to be an unprovoked massacre. But does this cloud have a silver lining? The forestry industry maintains that burning mimics the role of fire in nature, helping to regenerate the forest. But in reality, the majority of cleared forest is never given a chance to regenerate. Instead, most end up like this. Trunk after trunk, row upon row of monocultured, fast-growing trees. It'll be another 10 years before trees in this plantation are ready for harvest.
After a native forest has been flattened and it's been replaced with just a single species, a crop, what the loggers have done is drive away and in fact kill the native species that were living in the forest in the first place. A whole variety of species which can't grow in the tiny spindly regrowth trees or the plantation trees which replaced the original forest. So by doing that, the industry is slowly but surely driving native species extinct.
Plantations like this are relentlessly creeping across Tasmania. 12,500 hectares were planted in 2006 alone. In the early stages, when the plantation trees emerge, they are vulnerable. Unaware that this area is off limits, the native forest herbivores instinctively search out these tasty snacks. But plantation seedlings are worth money. Carrots laced with 1080 poison are strewn across the land, a deadly lure. Forestry describes this as the most humane existing way to kill wildlife. While the use of 1080 has been phased out in state forests, it remains in use on private land. For the eagle, in its search for food, these vast plantations, once prime hunting grounds, might as well have been concreted over. The rows of trees are packed too closely to allow the eagle to maneuver effectively after its prey. The parents now have to travel over this land and further afield in their search for a meal. There is little hunting to be had here anymore. Plantation trees have a short existence before they're chopped down for timber, and most won't end their days in Tasmania. The distant shores of Asia will be their final resting place. Here at Burnie Port, woodchip mountains loom ominously. The mound grows steadily as the chipping machines methodically shred every log that is fed to them. This is Guns, Tasmania's logging giant and the biggest hardwood chip company in the world. Nearly 90% of the wood chipped is from native forests. Wood chipping, as the industry would have it, is part of a waste not, want not strategy, making use of the otherwise useless wood left behind once the high-quality timber is removed. This byproduct is turned into wood chip. But this is a byproduct with a healthy profit margin, and it's produced in vast volumes. In fact, last year, Forestry Tasmania alone produced nearly 3 times more wood chips by weight than all other wood products combined. At 8 weeks old, the eagle chick's flight feathers are beginning to push through his soft down, and time alone on the nest has given him a chance to explore his surroundings. Feeding without the help of his parents still presents a bit of a challenge, but that won't stop him from trying.
Top predators, particularly large birds of prey, like eagles, suffer an enormous range of problems with people. In a temperate place like Tasmania, large eagles typically, they're very stable. What happens with people is we introduce a whole new set of things the eagles never had to deal with. People still shoot eagles, they still poison eagles. Eagles hit power lines, they hit cars, eagles hit wind turbines. And these influences tend to keep growing, not diminishing.
More than 1 in 10 of Tasmania's eagles are killed each year through direct human impacts. But the loss of large tracts of habitat could be the final nail in the coffin. The felling of old-growth trees does not only destroy potential nest sites and hunting areas, it can have other devastating side effects.
What we have is more and more of these nests each year being more and more disturbed. Over the last 25 years I've been monitoring samples of nests, and of the original sample that was undisturbed, nearly all of those now are disturbed.
Our chick is one of about 200 Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagles fledging this year, and his parents have been lucky so far. They are shy nesters, and any disturbance close by may be enough to cause abandonment of the nest, leaving eggs or small chicks to die.
In 50 or 100 years, nearly all of the nests outside formal reserves will be disturbed. So we're looking at a progressive diminishment in productivity. The end point of that is, will the wedge-tailed eagle in Tasmania survive? Yes, it will, but it will survive at much less numbers, and those numbers will be below the carrying capacity.
In 2004, 68 years to the day that the last thylacine died in captivity, a report confirmed that logging practices have badly damaged the Tasmanian eagle's habitat, leaving it with just a 3% chance of long-term survival. Will we stand by and watch history repeat itself? It's been just 2 months since this young eagle emerged from his egg and opened his eyes. He's been busy training and strengthening his wing muscles, and his perspective on the world is about to expand yet again. His parents will protect and train him for the coming months. But the first few years of a young eagle's life are hazardous, and there is only so much they can do. Only 1 in 6 survive to maturity.
An interesting way to think about the relative importance of premature mortality to breeding success with eagles is to consider that it takes 5 or 10 chicks to produce 1 adult. So if you lose an adult a little bit early, you can only compensate for that by enhancing productivity by 5 or 10 chicks. And that's an awful lot of effort. I'm a great believer in prevention instead of cure, so actually trying to protect those nests, trying to stop us drifting into emergency management, which is so prevalent with endangered species in other places, is a huge cost saving, but most importantly, in doing so, you stop a functional collapse in the ecosystem.
To prevent such a collapse, forestry management is of paramount importance. But it's a complicated business, and meeting demands from both industry and the wider community is a daunting task.
Certainly in terms of the way we strike the balance between conservation and jobs, in Tasmania, a significant area of Tasmania's forests are over 40% have been put in secure reserves that are unavailable for economic development use at all. Of the areas of state forest that we manage, a substantial area of those are also set aside for conservation purposes for local reasons. What we do is work with experts and we work out how can we maintain the balance between conserving and enhancing species and providing the substantial economic development that forestry activities provide to Tasmanians and Australians.
The Regional Forest Agreement for Tasmania placed 396,000 hectares of land into reserves. However, these reserves are not all forest and are concentrated where eagle density is low. Unfortunately for the eagle, their prime habitat is also the best forest for logging. The management of eagles centres around the protection of nest sites in small reserves. To find the location of a nest, Forestry Tasmania takes to the air.
Forestry Tasmania cares about eagles. They're magnificent birds, and we do a whole lot of management practices to ensure that particularly breeding eagles aren't disturbed. We do regular helicopter surveys of potential eagle sites. We spend about $250,000 a year just on that survey component of identifying eagle nests. And there's probably about another $20 million in foregone revenue by ensuring that the area around eagles' nests aren't subject to roading or harvesting.
Today, a nest has been found, and the surrounding patch of forest will be excluded from harvesting and protected from disturbance. This practice has been in place for 15 years, but in the past, eagle nests were not so lucky. 20 years ago, a tree holding a magnificent eagle nest narrowly escaped being chopped down. Since its close call, it's been protected from logging activities and disturbance. Today, Bill Brown from the government's Threatened Species Unit has returned to check its activity.
This particular site has 5 nests in it. A couple of those nests are now disintegrated. They were found during harvesting operation. This particular nest was found by a dozer driver as he was preparing a track. That's one. And this is a really good example of what the sort of thing I look for to determine if a nest is active or been active. Would have been broken off by the birds while it was green, and you can see how the bark strips off like that. Whitewash. It's everywhere. Plenty of whitewash on the shrubs and on the rocks and the trunk of the tree below, which suggests that a chick has fledged from this particular nest. Even though there's been disturbance in the past, because that disturbance hasn't continued, the birds have come back, they've rebuilt in the same site.
This nest serves as a reminder that if we can protect nest sites and reduce disturbance, the wedge-tailed eagle might soar once more as the apex predator in Tasmania's forests.
The community expectations on forestry are huge, both from producing wood, producing money and conservation, and I find it very hard to see how they can meet all of those expectations. Many people in the industry try very hard, but I can't help feeling that the expectations are completely incompatible.
Managing forestry is a fine balance between economics and environment. Governments can place rules and regulations on timber harvesting, but conflicts arise as they strive to protect jobs and avoid voter backlash. The forestry industry touts the number of jobs that it provides for the local community, but what gets far less press is the fact that jobs in forestry have been declining for years. Wood chipping employs far fewer people than the old saw logging mills, and many of Tasmania's skilled craftsmen have already been displaced by mechanisation of the industry. The forestry industry does still remain very important to Tasmania, contributing $1 billion annually to the economy and directly employing more than 1 in 10 Tasmanian workers. Conservationists are often accused of trying to bring the logging industry to a grinding halt, but the objectives of the vast majority are much more realistic.
The Greens have a transition strategy in Tasmania to keep some areas, which have already been roaded and partially logged, for the ongoing production of specialty timbers, high quality craft wood, really magnificent rainforest-based furnishings and so on. But that's it. We simply don't need to be logging our native forests, and nowhere in this nation should we be clear felling, burning and then poisoning wildlife. It's last century, it's not this century.
The Wilderness Society, the most prominent conservation group in Tasmania, supports the aspects of the timber industry which create the most employment and community benefit.
Here in Tasmania, forestry is a very important industry, but over the years most of the jobs have gone from being in old growth to being in plantations, regeneration and the processing of those smaller types of logs. There's only a very small proportion of the industry, less than 500 people, who are now employed in destroying wilderness areas, areas of high conservation value and old growth. It's very important for those people who are employed in old growth logging, but it's the opinion of the Wilderness Society that the Australian public, through governments, should be providing the funds to allow those people to get jobs in other parts of the logging industry.
While environmental lobbyists in Tasmania are unsatisfied, they remain a force to be reckoned with. Over the years, conservationists have risked life and limb to protect their precious wilderness. Camps blocking logging tracks, lobbying politicians, and marches attracting thousands of people are only the beginning. Even the harshest of conditions won't dampen their enthusiasm. This protest is in the Styx Valley. Undeterred by rain and snow, protesters sat high up in the trees in an attempt to put a halt to logging. Many of these trees are more than 400 years old and taller than a 25-story building. Tens of thousands of people have joined the campaign to protect these natural wonders from the chainsaws. A national poll in 2004 found that more than 87% of the entire nation's public wanted the felling of Tasmania's old-growth forests for wood chips to be stopped. But as public dissent grows, the logging giant Gunns is vying to expand its operations. Gunns plans to build a $1.5 billion pulp mill on Tasmania's Tamar River. The mill would convert wood chips into pulp for export to Asia. Environmentalists and residents fear that the mill will release unacceptable levels of polluting organochlorines, nitrous oxide, and other effluents, putting habitats and people's health at risk. Meanwhile, economists are raising concerns about the mill's ability to compete with other wood pulp producers emerging internationally. What is certain is that the mill would ensure the demand for felled trees continues well into the future. But is logging really the future for Tasmania's forests?
Here in Tasmania, tourism, it's an industry which is on the increase. The logging industry, on the other hand, has been just going down, down, down. Most tourists are not going to pay good money to come and see a plantation, regeneration or bulldozers, or an area that's just been clear-felled. They want to see magnificent forests in spectacular mountain settings like we have here in Tasmania, and that's already the backbone of our economy.
Since the early 1800s, nature has been a major drawcard for generations of visitors to Tasmania. And it's this rich natural wilderness which still remains at the core of Tasmania's tourism appeal today. In fact, tourism in Tasmania is booming. Over $1.1 billion was brought into the local economy by tourism in the last year, an amount that rivals the economics of forest-based industries.
One of the things Forest Tasmania is proud of is what we do, and we like to share that with people. So we've established a couple of tourism ventures, and what we like to do there is explain to people the story about forests, the story about forest inhabitants, including wedge-tailed eagles and quolls and wallabies and potoroos. And we like to make sure that people have some sort of context. Forestry is a very long-term business, and often people's reaction to things are about the immediate.
To glimpse what the future might hold for Tasmania, we travel far away to Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Historically, fishing was the main industry here, and unabated extraction gave the reef little chance of survival. But a dramatic shift occurred And as fish stocks dwindled, tourism came to the fore. Today, millions of visitors bring over $3.5 billion to the economy annually, supporting a workforce of 43,000 people. It is now Tasmania's turn to look to the future. A great opportunity lies ahead. Every year, on January the 26th, 20 million people celebrate what it is to be Australian. And every year on this day, another unique Australian has a celebration of its own. Deep in the forest, 11 weeks since he emerged from his egg, this young Tasmanian is preparing for his first adventure, his first flight from the nest. Today, his wings carry him to a nearby branch, but very soon he'll fly beyond the canopy to the forest world beyond. The forests of Tasmania are vastly older than both you and I. And it was from great forests such as these that our own ancestors once emerged.
This curl on our ears is not fashioned to pick up sounds from TV or iPods. This is to pick up the faintest sound off the forest floor. We need forests because they give us heart, they give us inspiration, they give us a sense of being, and they're an avenue back to where we come from.
In Tasmania, wedge-tailed eagle populations continue to decline, and the list of threats to their survival grows each year. The extinction of the Tasmanian eagle will not only mean the loss of an iconic Australian, but also the loss of a major player in the forest ecosystem, the last of Tasmania's top predators. Is the extinction of this magnificent bird a price we're willing to pay for wood chips and pulp? Amid increasing global concern about the future of our planet, ancient forests worldwide need protection.
These natural environments, including the old growth forests, as well as providing an important economic resource, also provide spiritual fulfilment for generations of people to come. It's our job to protect those magnificent places, and that's what the Wilderness Society is about. And we're a great believer in the power of people to make change, and so we try to involve as many people as we can in these campaigns.
The old growth forests of this planet make our spirits soar, and together we need to share this future. We need to pass the forests and the eagles on to our children so their spirits can soar as well.
In the remnants of one of Australia's last great forests, our young eagle flies for the first time. As he looks at the world from this new perspective, we can only hope that his offspring too will soar over the wild forests of Tasmania.
We all have a responsibility to protect the environment and look after the animals and plants that live there. If you want to help with the wedge-tailed eagle and other animals, then visit our website or call this number.